go live. And we should be live right about now. So a warm welcome to everyone who's looking. I know we have a few of you already. All right, so hello everyone. Hi, I'm Faraz, and I'm going to be the host here today. And thank you for tuning in to this very first episode of Bird is the Word. This is a very laid-back conversation on birds, birding, and all sorts of very cool bird-related things from around the world. And remember, while the date is set for each episode, the time is going to vary depending on the time zone our guest is in. So be sure to head across to learnthebirds.com and register there, be part of our rapidly growing community, and most importantly, get that Monday Birding newsletter where you'd be notified of all of the wonderful goings on at Learn the Birds. Also, be sure to subscribe to this Learn the Bird YouTube channel, where you're looking at this right now. And of course, feel free to interact in the chat, right? Say something, let us know where you're from. Just keep it birdie. So today's guest is Dr. Derek Keats from Johannesburg in South Africa. And at this point, I would like to introduce and welcome Derek to our show. So welcome, Derek. And I think you should be unmuted. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. Hi, Faraz. Thanks a lot for inviting me to be the guinea pig.
Yeah, no problem at all. No problem. So before I really get started, I have a question for you. That question is, what is the last bird you saw today?
What is the last? Probably a hadida.
Yeah,
because they come to drink water at my swimming pool outside my window.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and then they go up and sleep the night on the roof of the house.
And they make a whole lot of noise, right?
In the morning, they wake you up at 5 at this time of the year, 5:30, 6 o'clock. Mm-hmm. In summer, 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, Derek, would you be able to tell us a little bit about where you live? I know you started already, and what's it like there?
Well, have you put up the map? I guess you've put up the map.
Yeah,
there we go.
There we go.
You may want to make that full screen.
I'm reading your mind.
You are. You're good at it. So I live in Johannesburg, which for those of you who've never been to this part of the world before, is in South Africa. It's in the northern central part of South Africa, where the red circle is here, and the circle encompasses Johannesburg and Pretoria. And we are inland. We are roughly a mile high. So it can get quite chilly here in winter, being at such a high altitude. And it's also summer rainfall area. So we just finished our rainy season and we are now entering the dry season. And we hopefully shouldn't have any more rain until October. I say hopefully because as I look out the window, it's raining, and this is unusual for for late April, early May. Normally by now the rains have stopped, but I believe I say that every year. So yeah,
it's topsy-turvy all over the world, because here in Trinidad it's also we only have 2 seasons, and right now it's supposed to be our dry season, and we've been getting rain. This is our wettest dry season thus far. So yeah, how long have you lived there? And before that, where were you?
Yeah, I lived in Joburg for 10 years now, I guess 10, 11, actually going for the 12th year. Before that, I lived in Cape Town for 20 years. And during that time, I guess I spent a year in Fiji. Before that, I spent 2 years living in Zimbabwe. And before that, I was originally from Canada, from Newfoundland, where we often have visitors on Learn the Birds from.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I am, just as an aside, I mean, me getting into birding to the level that I am now really only started when I moved to Johannesburg. So I'm a relative newbie to the world of birding.
Oh, but I'm sure you've at least the birds have been looking at you all over the place where you've been, right?
Well, I make a lot of noise, so probably.
And how was the birding around Joburg?
Well, I'm going to show some pictures later on about some of the areas around Joburg, but I mean, the birding is excellent. I have 69 species in my garden.
Fantastic.
And I think if I counted the ones that I just heard but didn't see, it might be into the low 70s. So that's not bad for an urban garden.
Not at all.
And Johannesburg has got the distinction of being a very large urban forest. And in fact, if you fly a drone over other than the downtown area of Joburg, which is tall buildings, but anywhere out of the downtown, if you fly a drone over, you actually can see the houses. They're all under trees.
That's wonderful.
And so we have an incredible number of birds, and just right in the middle of the city. And I've gotten birds here that I thought, when I went to Kruger National Park, which is a 5-hour drive from here, I'd only seen there. And then like last year, they suddenly appear in my backyard. And I don't know if it's because I've become more aware of them, or I think last year was probably an exceptional year, climate or weather-wise as well.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of birds moved up onto the higher areas that don't normally, spend a lot of time here. But yeah, it's very, very excellent birding around Johannesburg. I mean, we've got Botanical Garden, 20-minute drive from my house, which is absolutely got stunning birds in it. We're surrounded by nature reserves. I mean, I think there's more than a dozen fairly big nature reserves within an hour drive of where I live. And of course, then we've got also the big national parks like Kruger National Park, Mapungubwe, Marikeli, Pilanesberg National Park, which is not really a national park, but you've got to understand the history of South Africa, why it's called a national park. It used to be in one of the homelands. So it was a national park in the homeland, but now it's a provincial park because that's now a province. Yeah, so that's some unique things from the history of South Africa. But yeah, we're 5-6 hours drive to the border with Botswana. We're a 5-6 hour drive to the border with Zimbabwe. A 5-hour drive to Mozambique. About a 6-hour drive to the Indian Ocean. And about a 5-6 hour drive to the Karoo. So we really have an amazing diversity of birds around here, and a similar distance to drive to the Drakensberg Mountains, which gets you up to between 2,000 and 3,000 meters. So
yeah,
tremendous diversity of birds around here. Yeah.
Well, it definitely sounds like that. Now, I understand that you have quite a varied background. Could you tell us a little bit more about you and your background?
So maybe you can just move on to you can put up the slides and or the pictures. And my background is in marine biology, and I spent many years working on coastal ecosystem ecology, looking at the relationship between the feeding methods, herbivory, and abundance of algae and fish, and all of those sorts of things. But at the same time, I was always interested a little bit in birds, and I used to go out with friends of mine who were keen birders, and some of whom were studying ornithology, and I always kind of kept an eye open for birds wherever I went. And I lived a 2-hour drive away from Cape St. Mary's, which is one of the largest northern gannet colonies in the world. And it is an absolutely amazing place. It's just absolutely full of seabirds, and you can't go there and see it and not be interested in birds. So that's actually Cape St. Mary's in the picture there. Then when I came to South Africa after spending 2 years in Zimbabwe, where I did, try and photograph birds and things in the national parks. I was a school teacher teaching biology and computer science, and every school holiday, which occurred 3 times a year. So 3 times a year, you get a month off. And I would go to the bush and take pictures of wildlife, including birds. But then when I came to South Africa, I started working on these crustose coralline algae, which was the pink stuff in the
Oh,
previous slide.
yeah.
And during that time, one of my great adventures was being invited to the Galapagos by the Charles Darwin Research Station to look at the coralline algae in the Galapagos. And of course, I spent some time also looking at birds, and
Of
you
course.
can't go to the Galapagos and not look at birds. There is
Impossible.
absolutely no way,
Yeah.
And so things like the blue-footed booby and Galapagos penguin. And interestingly, if you go to the next slide, and probably then on to the next one. Interestingly, when we were diving, looking at the coralline algae, we often had the penguins swimming around us, and these are about 6 Galapagos penguins that just seemed to follow us around. And I don't know, they were always curious. They'd go up to the surface and then come down and try and catch the bubbles, which I suppose they may have thought were fish.
Yeah.
And so I came back from the Galapagos, and I said, I'm definitely going to get into birding. But then life took over, and I went back to being a university professor and moved on to being a university, what we call deputy vice chancellor, I guess what you'd call vice president in North America, of 2 universities. And that kind of kept me away from it for a while. But 11 years ago, I gave that up, and my hobby of technology became my job, and my profession of biology became my hobby. So now birds are really part of my life and part of what I do.
Yeah, well, clearly this one is on your head.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually can't see what that one is, but it's a spotted eagle owl.
Yeah, it is. An owl, spotted eagle owl. Excellent.
Yeah, that was in the place where they do what do you call it, when rehabilitation of birds that have been injured or that have been raised by humans. And some of the ones that have been raised by humans are too habituated. They can't be released in the wild because they starve. And this is one of those, and it's very tame and very friendly, and it's a really great place to get to know birds. That's in Dahlstrom, about a 3-hour drive from Joburg.
Well, I'm hoping its talons didn't dig into your head too much, right?
The owls are the interesting thing about owls. If you take an owl put it on the one hand, and then an eagle of the same size and put it on the other hand, the eagle's going to go like that.
Really?
Because it's bone and mass, and it's strong, and it's got all these tendons which are dense and all of that. But the owl is literally as light as a feather. I mean, you see the size of that bird. It's as big as my head, but it like it can sit on one finger, and you wouldn't even notice.
I've seen pictures of some huge owls sitting on some really, really thin twigs, like some of the great gray owls of the far north and stuff like that. And I'm like, but how? But then, you think about it and you learn more about it, and you realize that an owl that size, a lot of it is mostly feathers.
It's just fluffed up feathers. If you ever see an owl that has got no feathers, it's literally small.
Yes, tiny. And their legs are really long, and they look so strange.
It does, yeah. So that's
wonderful. So you mentioned that you like to observe and learn about LBJs. And for those of you all who don't know, LBJs are little brown jobs, which are the tiny brown birds that everyone tries to stay away from because they're notoriously difficult to identify. But Derek, you enjoy them, and especially larks and pipits. Could you tell us a little bit more about this fascination that you have with them?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I think when I was doing my biology, I was really interested in crustose coralline algae, which are the sorts of marine plants that nobody else worked on. And that had the advantage that I could find new species, new genera. We even, with my former PhD student, have a new family. So you could work on stuff that nobody had worked on before because they're actually difficult to work on. Sorry, my phone is making dings. Let me just put it off.
It happens.
um, yeah, so I think in a way the LBJs, the little brown jobs, are analogous to that. They're the kinds of things that you can learn an awful lot from, but not a lot of people know very much about them,
Yeah,
and
they're
what
intimidating.
they are intimidating at first,
Yeah.
and even now after several years of chasing them around. I mean, there are I'll end with the last picture, with which is a difficult one, to teach me a lesson that I shouldn't imagine that I know very much, because actually I don't. Nobody does
Yeah.
about these things, but they are interesting from the perspective of I don't know, obscurity, I guess.
Yeah.
and they have a lot to teach us, because they don't have bright colored feathers and long tails that come in the summer and all of those things, which make
Mhm.
their biology obvious. If you're interested, as I am, in evolution and
Mhm.
understanding that the evolution of birds, as I was with other organisms back in the day, you can actually learn things that are less obvious than
Yeah,
if you were working with widow birds, for example, where
of course.
the sexual selection
Yeah.
for absurd characters is pretty well documented and pretty easy to
Yeah.
see.
Well, it's
Where
obvious.
Yes, whereas with the
Mhm.
LBJs, they do have a lot to teach us, but you have to look a little harder to find it. That's the thing, and the looking a little harder makes it more interesting. I think makes it more exciting when you do actually, I'm not a primary researcher, so I'm not actually doing any science on
Mhm.
the birds. I'm just observing them as a casual birder. That's all.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I read the scientific papers and try and then go out in the field and say, "Oh, that's interesting. Can I see that in the field?"
Yeah.
And sometimes also you can read the papers about the more obvious birds with more obvious characteristics, and go out in the field and you actually can see them on a more subtle level in the
Mhm.
LBJs. So, yeah.
It's interesting for me with the LBJs also, because I find that it's like that embodiment of the more you look, the more you see. Because
Exactly.
at some point in time, like I would look at all of, like, say, female seed eaters over here, or let's say sandpipers, like the small sandpipers, and I look at all of these things and think, well, they're all the same bird. And then the more you learn about them, then you realize, okay, well, they're different species. And then you realize, okay, well, this one is in breeding plumage, or this one is a young one, this one is a male, this one is a female. And there is so much more you can learn if you just look a little deeper.
Yeah, and with the LBJs, you don't have any choice. You have to look at behavior.
Yeah.
The behavior is as important to understanding the bird and recognizing it as a separate species
Yeah.
as the blue feathers or the green
Of
feathers if
course.
it was
Yeah.
a bee eater.
Yeah. It forces you to be more attentive
Yes,
to
and also to the
details.
sounds.
Yeah.
Two
I
birds
mean,
can look so similar that you can't tell them
yeah.
apart, but then you listen and
Yeah.
it's playing it's called it's different. It's got
Yeah.
some different notes, and I'm not great at sounds, by the way. But there are people who I
Yeah.
sometimes go birding with who are good at it, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Of course. And of course, I mean, like, we are predominantly visual species, right? So colors always stand out to us. And we're always looking for for the extravagantly colored bird, or we're looking for clues that lend to this kind of identification, like visual cues. But and it's also reflected in social media, and the pictures that get the most likes and the most shares and the most comments, the most popular images are usually ones of extravagantly colored birds. um,
Yes.
so it shifts attention away from these lovely LBJs, and I think that they have so much that they can contribute in terms of our understanding of birds.
Yeah, what's really interesting too is if you look at some of the really extravagant birds like the cock of the rock or the paradise birds in Papua New Guinea kind of area, and you see this extravagant behavior and all of that. This happens in the LBJs, but it's much more subtle, and you really have
Yeah.
to watch this. You have to look to see it, and then you understand a little bit better how these birds could have evolved and how maybe species could have differentiated for I mean, let's take sexual selection as an example. I mean, if you have two populations of females that prefer different kinds of males,
Mm-hmm.
you have a potential for that to drive speciation.
Yeah.
And even sort of pretty much sympatric speciation, where where it's happening in the same area, or at least different habitats in the same geographical area. But yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
but you only see that when you start thinking about how to apply the broader concepts to the more subtle behaviors and looks and sounds and that of the LBJs. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Wonderful. So let's get into the birds. I believe we should do that.
sounds
Um,
like a good idea.
yeah, you mentioned a trip to the Karoo,
Yes.
Karoo National Park.
Yes. Sorry. I think let's go to the next slide. So
There we go.
every no, the one before that with the map.
Oh, before that, yeah.
Sorry, I think I might have been looking at my own slide and not at yours. It happens.
Yeah, that's it
Uh,
does happen. Yeah. So
seems like there's one missing there. Is there one
well,
missing?
I'm seeing the one here with
Yeah,
the
that one.
there we
That's the one I
go.
want. Yes. So yeah, so every summer, which is December, January here, for the
Mhm.
summer holiday, I usually go off somewhere to the bush for anything up to I think the longest trip I did was about 5 weeks.
Oh.
So usually between 2 and 5 weeks. This summer past it was about 3 weeks, just under 3 weeks.
Hmm.
And we left Johannesburg, which is just inside the red circle at the top there.
Yeah.
And I'll just show you on the map where we went, and then I'll talk about the LBJs of interest. Obviously, I could spend hours on any one place, but since we're focusing on the LBJs and the interest in the LBJs, particularly larks and pipits, and I'm going to especially focus on larks. I could do pipits, but pipits still confuse the living daylights out of me. And every time I think I know one, and I want to put up the picture, and I'm like, oh, I'm not so sure that that's that
Yeah.
one.
I don't
You
think
know.
you're totally unique in that front.
So in the field, I know that that's what it was. But when you get back and you've forgotten
Hmm.
which one was which,
Yeah.
telling them apart from a photograph is yeah. So anyway, we left Joburg, drove to Kimberley, which is the
Hmm.
first star there, the red star in the middle, to a place
Hmm.
called Marik Safari. Now, Marik Safari is interesting because it's probably the best place in South Africa to see nocturnal mammals like black-footed cat and aardvark. The
Okay.
little anteater
Yeah.
of the dry areas, the arid areas,
I learned them when
and
I was learning about the alphabet when I was a little boy. A
yes,
is for aardvark.
so yeah, well, A is also for aardwolf, which
Oh,
is a
nice.
hyena relative
Yeah.
that also lives in burrows in the ground.
Hmm.
Hence ard, which is Afrikaans for near the ground, in the ground.
Yeah.
Um, and aardvark is ground pig, and aardwolf is ground wolf, right? So
Hmm.
they're a hyena relative that lives in burrows and eats termites. And they pretty much only eat one or two species of termites. The incredibly specialized diet, which is one of the reasons, as things that specialize tend to be more endangered than things that are generalists.
Of course.
So, but that's a really good place to see them and other nocturnal animals and rabbits and things like that. And so a lot of people go there for that. I went there for the birds. But before we move on to that, let me just say that Mark Safari is actually a hunting. It's a nature reserve, but it's also a hunting reserve, and the hunting season is typically from what are we now? April. I think it's May or early April up until the end of September. And what you can be opposed to hunting, but I can tell you that some of the best conserved areas in southern Africa that I've been to, for birds especially, are the hunting areas. And I love going to hunting farms and reserves, just simply because you just see so many more birds, and also the mammals are often more abundant than they would be in a normal reserve that doesn't allow hunting.
It sounds so counterintuitive.
It is, and
Yeah.
but Marek is that's what Marek is, and so I went there for the birds, and I thought it was important to say that it is a hunting place.
Yeah.
Then from there we went to not far away, about 70 k's down the highway, to Mokala National Park, which is the blue star there. That's a relatively new national park in South Africa. It's about 20 or so years old. But it is absolutely beautiful, and it's really the northern end of the Karoo, the southern end of, together with Marek, and the southern end of the Kalahari. So it's got characteristics of the Karoo, characteristics of the Kalahari, and characteristics of the Bushveld. So it's a really interesting area.
Yeah, a little bit of everything.
And interestingly, the previous times when I've been in that part of the world, it's been absolutely bone dry. Doesn't matter whether it's winter or summer. This is just bone dry. It doesn't rain very much. But this year, they had the most rain that they've had in like 25 years, and everything was totally green and lush and amazing.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the map here and I'm thinking that, okay, well, the eastern end here seems green, and then the western end is brown. So I'm just assuming that it's a more arid habitat.
Yeah, so as you go from Johannesburg south and west, it becomes more and more dry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So then we went down rest of the way down the N12 highway to Beaufort West, to the Karoo National Park, which is the Green Star.
Yeah.
Which is also an amazing place for fossils, early reptile fossils, pre-dinosaur fossils, era fossils of reptiles, and some of the stem mammals as well.
Oh yeah.
So we'll talk about that a little bit just now, and then from there we went over to Tankwa Karoo National Park. We took the scenic route on what Esther my wife calls rickety roads. Because as you're driving along, it took us I think 8 hours to go from Karoo National Park to Tankwa Karoo. And that was very interesting. And we went down, we went past the National Observatory, which is, we've got some really interesting astrophysics that happens in South Africa as well, in Sutherland. And then we went down a mountain pass called the Oberg Pass. And the Oberg Pass is, wow. I don't know if I'll do it again with a trailer in tow, but anyway. So that's the 4 places that we're going to look at some LBJs from. So let's go to the next one.
And this here was your rig. This is what you made that trip with.
Yeah, all the birding trips are typically with this. I prefer camping to going and staying in lodges and chalets and things. Aside from it being considerably cheaper, it also puts you closer to the, to nature, as it were, And so yeah, that thing has gone everywhere. It's gone up through Botswana, up through Savuti, Chobe, crossed into Zimbabwe, down through Zimbabwe. It's done a lot of trips, that vehicle with the trailer. So yeah, it's my birding toy, and I have typically I have a gimbal on the window when I'm not when I'm driving on the highway, but once we're in the park, and I use it as a portable hide as well. So
yeah, they're very useful for that kind of thing.
Yeah. So if you go to the next slide, I'll show you what a Marek Safari looks like. This is This is Marek safari. This is typical northern Karoo, southern Kalahari, southwestern bushveld kind of habitat. It's a mixture of acacia, sweet thorn acacia, and grass, a little bit of grassland in between. So, well, it's grassland in the wind in this summer pass. It's not always grassland; it's often just bare ground.
All right.
And it's got incredible birds there. I mean, yeah, I don't want to get into it because if I do,
We'll
you
be
won't be
here
able to
for
shut me. Yeah, we'll be here for the rest of
6
the day.
hours.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just go to the next slide quickly, and I'll quickly just go through a few of these. I don't think that's the next one. The next one should be the rufous-cheeked warbler.
Mokala?
No, further up. I think you've gone too far down.
Oh,
The one after the car.
yeah. This is it Marek?
No, the next one. Yes.
The next one. So it's a car, and then this one, and then
Yeah.
the
Sorry. Yeah.
warbler.
That one. Yes.
There we go.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the rufous-cheeked warbler. And it belongs to the cisticolas family. And that was the reason I went to Marek.
Really?
I knew there was a good population there. I'd seen it before at Mokala, but I didn't get any decent pictures. It was late winter when we were in Mokala. Everything was very dry. The birds were very scarce, and I just didn't manage to get any pictures of it. So I wanted to get pictures of it, and I knew that at Marek, because it's not a national park or anything, you can get out and walk around, and I could go and lie under the bushes and look up at the bird feeding and stuff like that, which you just can't do in a national park. So that was the reason for going there. And this is a male up on the top of a bush calling. Female's got slightly dimmer cheeks and less prominent stripe across the chest.
Yeah, it's a beautiful bird, and it's a lovely photo as well. Like I love the light and everything.
Yeah, so I would go out early in the morning. Very early in the morning before daylight, because again, it being a private reserve, you can do that. There aren't these don't go out before dawn kind of rules that you have in the national parks, and I could get myself in position before the sun comes up and really catch the birds in a good light. So yeah,
that is the ideal situation.
So that's another reason I like these private reserves, which often do have hunting, as I said, is that if you're there when it's not the hunting season, you can pretty much do anything you want, as long as you're not doing anything harmful.
Yeah, you don't run the risk of getting shot, right?
Whereas in the hunting season, no, I wouldn't go there in the hunting season. So it's not that I would fear for my life. That's not the issue. The issue is I don't think that a nature lover and a hunter should be in the same place at the same time.
At the same time, yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. So this was a fortuitous bird. This is the eastern clapperlark, and this bird actually occurs not far from Johannesburg, but I have never seen it before. I think I've seen it before, but it's one of the ones that looks a lot like another bird, and is very difficult to catch unless you can see its behavior and listen to its song. So the one thing about the eastern clapperlark is that it has it looks a bit like the a rufous-naped lark, and they belong to the genus Meraphora, of course. So they are closely related. But the eastern clapperlark the males fly up in the air, so pretty much straight up, and then they flap their wings and then they flutter back down to the ground, or sometimes they just dive back down to the ground. Yeah. Whereas the rufous-naped lark, which is very closely related to it and has a somewhat sweet call, different phrasing, but sweet like the like this one. It's hard to describe without having the sound, but anyway. So being able to see this one and watch its behavior and watch its mating, its mating and territorial defense flights. I just spent the whole 2 days there, just sitting in the grass, watching them, and crawling through the grass and trying to see what they were doing, and these are amazing things that you can do in this kind of place. So I think we can move on to the next one. Otherwise,
before we go on, I just wanted to comment on the beauty of these birds, because they're brown and they look nondescript from a distance, but when you look, each feather is so intricately beautiful.
Yes.
Like down to an individual level, like the ones that are tipped in cream and the others that are barred, it's almost too much, right?
And what's interesting is they have the same sexual selection. The males and the females are not very different unless you look very closely. But I think there is still some sexual selection by female choice going on in these birds as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So we're looking at Mokala National Park, and this is it's your second stop, right?
Yes. So this is a typical Mokala scene. There are rocky hills and things there as well. But this is a typical scene. This is a sandy road through, and all the areas, this red Kalahari sand. Once you get into the Karoo, you'll see the color of the sand changes. But the previous time when we were there, this was completely bare. There was no grass anywhere. It was all just bare ground. Now look at it this year, and it was alive with birds. I mean, it was a totally different place altogether. And so if we go to the next slide.
Oh, well, this explains the green.
That explains the green. So this was, you can see that our tent is in the middle of a little lake there. But what's interesting about Mokala is there's no fences in the campsite. So just in front of where my car is parked there's a little water hole. And I don't know if it's exactly at the moment when I took this picture, but there was a herd of buffalo there, and there's no fence,
Ooh.
So you are with the animals,
Yeah.
So
I respect buffaloes a lot.
Yeah, so let's go to the next picture, and I think this is an interesting story to tell.
Yes.
So this is Nicholson's pipit. It used to be long-billed pipit. Now it's Nicholson's pipit, or southern long-billed pipit. And this is it looks so similar to a pipit like the plainback pipit or buffy pipit, but it's got this very different behavior. So it typically lives in areas where there's a rocky slope with lots of loose boulders and things, and trees nearby, or at least bushes, if not trees. And what it typically does is it feeds in the grass, and then it pops up onto the rock. And then if it sees something, it will fly up into a tree. And I don't have the picture of it in a tree, I think. No. And then it will make its call, which is weird shirt, Chewy, weird shirt, Chewy. And that's all it says over and over. I don't know what what it actually sounds like, but to me, that's what it sounds like. It's just like Star Wars, weird shirt, Chewy.
Well, I'm always wearing a weird shirt, so it's probably talking about me. I don't know.
Well, I'm wearing my shirt with a towel on it, so picture of a towel. So
yeah, right. So does it use these like the perch on the rock? Does it use it as a vantage point or something? How does it feed? It feeds in the grass, right?
Yeah. So I think a lot of birds feed in the grass, and that feed in the grass will pop up on top of an ant hill or something like that. So look around and then hop back down into the grass again if they don't see any danger. Or pop up onto a vantage point, and if it's a male, check for females, or vice versa for that matter, I guess. And but it has this very distinctive behavior that none of the other pipits do. It has a very distinctive habitat, having being associated with slopes with rocks. But it's not just slopes with rocks. It's slopes with rocks, and it's got to have some bushes.
Yeah,
I've never seen them in a place where there are no bushes. But what's interesting about this bird is that it teaches us about cryptic species, because there's two populations that were once considered to be the long-billed pipit, one in southern Africa and one in East Africa. And there's a geographic separation between the two. So there's no overlap, two populations with no overlap. And when biologists did the genetics, they discovered that actually from a genetic point of view, they're different species, and they've been separated for around about 2.5 million years, you know.
Wow.
And I don't know the exact figure. It could be 3, it could be 1.5, but you know, it's in that order of magnitude. But they look identical. So it teaches us that, you know, just because two populations of organisms or birds look identical doesn't mean that they all belong to the same species. You know, we can't biologically they can be separate species. They can have other genetic differences that may lead to other things. So they might have a slightly different call, for example, or they might have, you know, different femur length or, you know, something, you know.
Again, you know, the more you look, the more you see.
Exactly.
There is an embodiment of that.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
I'm seeing that we've used up quite a bit of time, so we probably should go fast, and we may want to skip over some of these slides, I think.
Yeah, let me just somehow this is taking up my entire screen. I don't know where the zoom. Okay, good. All right. So,
but sorry, but I think it's you know,
I think we almost finished though. Like
no, we're not even halfway.
That is true. I just checked. Yeah, you see what happens when we talk about birds?
Yeah, we just can't stop. I think let's do Karoo and Tankwa, and then we'll take stock and see where we are. I don't mind leaving out the learn to bird stuff. I think, you know, there are some optional things that we're going to talk about. I think it's better to focus on the birds than focus on what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure a lot of us would know about learn the birds already. I'm just going to quickly just check on the chat. I'm seeing a question from Swati. How was it in the tent in a lake?
Hi, Swati. Good to see you here. Yeah, in the tent in the lake. Well, the good thing is that the tent has a waterproof skirt that kind of comes part way up the side. So luckily the water didn't go over the skirt and start to run into the tent. So it was absolutely fine. And luckily the tent has a bed that you climb up to, as opposed to something that's lying on the ground. So even if the water rose quite high in the tent, you'd still be dry in the bed. So I guess it's okay.
Whoa. Crazy.
But we've been in heavier, wetter places than that, and managed to survive. So, right.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, what went on here? We went straight to the beginning.
Yeah, you did F5 instead of Shift F5.
That's true. That is exactly what happened. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah. So from there we went down to Karoo National Park. It's that was about a 6-7 hour drive. And through the Karoo, once you get about an hour or so south of Mokala, then you're starting to hit the Karoo proper. And you can see that it's a very different kind of landscape.
Yeah, totally.
If you look from the level of the highway here, which is the main road or the road into the park, that's what we're looking at here. And so you see this flat area leading up to what looks like mountains, but that mountain is actually the edge of the plateau that the rest of that Mokala and Kimberley and all that is on, and it gradually just sort of peters out and eventually you get to a point where it just becomes a vertical drop off, and so you're not really going up a mountain there. You're going up to the top of the plateau. and it's very eroded. It's a very eroded landscape. If you go to, where did you go? I think you missed the other slide.
Which
The
one?
other
This one?
slide, the one previous to that one. So yeah, that one. So that's actually the national park, Karoo National Park. The little houses that you can see in the distance there is the campsite and chalets. Those rugged mountains behind there are actually, it's the erosion of the plateau, almost like the Badlands in North America, where you've got the plateau being eroded with space in between. And then, you have some roads that go kind of wind their way up to the top. And I mean, it feels like you're going up a mountain, but effectively you're basically just going up the plateau. So there were a number of birds that I specifically went there to see. I didn't see all of them, but the larks performed very well. So the first one was the Karoo long-billed lark. This is a very arid, this bird is pretty much restricted to arid regions of South Africa. It's endemic to South Africa, or at least to Southern Africa. I don't know how far north it goes. I think just a little bit maybe into Namibia, and a little bit maybe into Botswana, but basically it's a Southern African endemic. This one is interesting. It's got a gray kind of color around its neck and this long curved bill and this very particular stance that it takes. And I mean, I think it occurs in areas, bushy areas as well, but in the areas with rocks, it has the tendency to come out in the morning early, and it's feeding all over the place. Then if you go to the next slide, as soon as the sun is up any little bit, it sits behind the rock with its wings out like that, because now the air can flow over the wings and keep it a little bit cool, because the temperatures on those rocks can get up to 60 degrees, which is enough to kill birds. So what does it do? It sits in the shadow, and it feeds on the side of the rock where the shadow is. So as the sun goes higher, it feeds closer and closer to the rock. And as the sun moves past, it goes to the other side of the rock. So it's always got some shadow, and it can carry on feeding. So it's a very well adapted, its behavior is very well adapted to feeding in these arid environments, because it can just follow the shadows wherever the shadows go. A lot of birds in arid areas have to go rest in the heat of the day, because they can't tolerate the heat, and they can't feed because they've got to go and sit up in a tree or something. Whereas this Karoo long-billed lark, it just seems to be particularly well adapted.
So well adapted, yeah, of course.
And I've discussed this with Susie Cunningham, who works on birds in the desert environments, and we were discussing the possibility that this kind of behavior and habitat use could actually be a factor in speciation. So we could have some sympatric speciation from the other long-billed larks, because there's the Gallus long-billed lark, there's eastern long-billed lark, Benguela long-billed lark. So there's 4 species, and they've separated by microhabitat.
Yeah, interesting. Here we have.
This was another. Yeah, this is another one that I went there for. I don't seem to have put a name on that one, but it's a grayback cisticola.
There we go.
It was, it was one that was on my bucket list for there, and I managed to get it right up at the top of the mountain, and they were very common there actually. And it's got a beautiful call. Lynette Rudman, Tim Cockcroft recently put a call of the species up on Xenocanto, which is worth listening to, because it's got a very, very distinctive call, not like any other cisticola.
Yeah, interesting. I'll check that out. And here we are. This is the last stop on the journey, is it?
So on this trip, this is the last stop, Tankwa Karoo, and this is the Oberg Pass. And there were places there where you're literally going down like that in a car towing a trailer, and
oh, that's why you were saying that you're not going to do this again with the trailer.
No, it's not as bad as it sounds, but it is a bit scary when you do it the first time. I mean, you're literally, it's gravel roads, so the wheels slide, and But you can see how high you're starting off from about 1,700 meters, and you're going down about just over a kilometer over a very short distance.
Yeah.
Over these little knolls that you go down, and then you go around, and yeah, it's very interesting. But you can see what an arid place it is.
Yeah, and it's so vast, you know, like coming from an island, I can tell you that there's no place on within the country where I live where we can stand somewhere and look at some, you know, just this never-ending horizon of
Yes.
land.
So what you're looking at there in the distance is the Cederberg Mountains that separate the Tankwa Karoo from the Makwaland and the coast. So
Yeah.
the coast is just on the other side of those mountains, about
Okay,
70
yeah.
Ks, you get to the ocean. 70
Yeah.
Ks on the other side of the mountains, you get to the ocean. So the mountains, the Rocheberg Mountains on the east block the rain from falling there, and the Cederberg Mountains on the west block moisture from coming in over from the ocean. So
Yeah.
it is
Interesting.
literally, you know, it's like the deserts in Nevada, like you know, we have mountains on both sides, and you get Death
Yeah.
Valley and
Yeah,
stuff
it
like that.
blocks
Yeah.
it blocks it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
So
go 70K in any direction here, and you go definitely gonna end up in the ocean. Any direction, doesn't matter.
yeah. So yeah, that's Tankwa Karoo. It is just a landscape of low vegetation, some
Yeah.
bushes. There are, especially along water courses, although the water courses don't have water in them every year. They can go. I mean, we spoke to a farmer on the way down here that said that they hadn't had rain on the farm for 8 years.
Interesting.
So
8 years.
it's pretty dry.
Does
Yeah.
does the water like go underground? Like there's an underground water table or something, or it just disappears altogether?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine it goes underground, but there just isn't much rain there. I mean,
Yeah.
they don't get as much rain in a year as we had in the garden here in the day. So
Yeah. Wow. These are things to ask the elephants, right? The elephants always know.
yes, if only they could tell you. Yeah, so if we can, yeah, and you can see how dry it is. I mean, this is a car. I don't know how long it's been in the desert, but it's been there for a long time, and it's
Yeah.
it's still there. Not, the metal is not rusted. People have stolen the doors and the glass and stuff, but the metal is still there. You know,
Yeah, this
that's
is
how dry it is.
proper vintage stuff, man.
Yeah. So, and that's up another one of the passes, looking down at one of the
Yeah.
dry water courses, and
Yeah, you can
yeah,
see the water course.
yeah,
Interesting.
there's green around it, but there was no water there this time.
Yeah.
Apparently there was some rain just after we left, but it flows out and goes somewhere,
Yeah.
and that's it. It's all done.
Immediately. Oh, there
Yeah.
is your camper.
Yeah, so this is the first lark. So this is a old farm. It's actually not a built up campsite. There's nothing there. There's no toilets or anything. You take a shovel and you dig a hole,
Yeah.
and so, but when we set up, and it's called Paper Saboom, Piper's tree. And it's an old gum tree from the old farmstead, and so getting there late in the evening when it's almost dark. Just next slide.
Nope.
And this little bird was wandering around, and it was one of my target species, the Karoo lark.
Ideal situation.
And it was totally friendly, although it was almost dark. It was like you can see a little bit of sunlight beams there in the background as the sun was setting, but it was just wandering around, and I stood still, it walked between my legs, and it was literally very, very forgiving, and and so it enabled me to get some pictures of it, and this was a major thing for me, because I've been looking for this bird for a long time and never found it, and so it was really awesome to have it there in the campsite, and after moving on from the campsite, I went back there again, got some more pictures of it. So
nice.
But it's another one of these Southern African endemics.
Is this one a young bird? I'm seeing like some yellow on the gape and stuff.
It's probably a young one. There's also some spots on its head, which larks tend to have.
Yeah.
The young juvenile larks tend to have these spots on the top of their head. So
Hmm.
I would guess it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and also they tend to be a lot more trusting from my experience, the young birds.
It was the only one I saw. I didn't get another one. And then going up that pass, the one which had the road, which had the line of trees along the watercourse, we found the large-billed larks, and they
Hmm.
are just the cute. This is also a young one. You
Yeah,
can see it's got also spots on top of its head,
yeah,
and they're just the cutest little things. I mean, they walking around feeding, and they're all going. The contact calls are the loudest contact calls I've ever heard of any lark. I mean, they're just,
yeah,
you know how chickens go around going,
yeah,
so
yeah.
they, they're doing that all the time, but in lark speak rather than chicken speak.
That's crazy. On these red cap larks, nice. I think I
Yes,
saw red cap larks. They occur further north, don't they?
yes, they are. They're pretty
Uh,
widespread in sub-Saharan Africa, or at least in southern Africa, anyway,
mm,
central to southern Africa, and you see them. They're they're widespread, but they're also a little bit nomadic. So you
hmm.
can see thousands of them in one place, and then
Yeah,
go back a week later and you don't
I
see
see
any.
none. Yeah,
Yeah, but they were all over the place. I wasn't expecting to see so many, but they're everywhere in the desert. And there was this little water hole that was near one of the campsites, and they would come in around 9 o'clock in the morning. You can see from the shadows there, it's not early, but it's
yeah.
not late either, probably between 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Hmm.
Um, and there are literally thousands of them coming in to drink from this water hole. But they're all over, even out in the desert there where that old rusted car was.
Yeah.
They were all over there as well. Very abundant.
This picture is such a fantastic illustration of how tough these birds can be from my perspective, at least, because like I'm looking at these four birds here, and I know they're all the same species, but they all have subtle differences.
I should have put one of the pictures in that had juveniles in them. If you saw the juvenile, the so the first my first batch that came in and landed while I was parked there,
Yeah.
were all juveniles, and I was going through my book and I got out fancy peacocks, LBJs, and I'm going through
Yeah.
what the hell is this? And then I saw one of the adults come in and face palm.
Yeah.
This is a red cap lark.
Whoa, yeah, because like the bird on the extreme left, it has a little bit of streaking, like some faint streaking on the breast, and then the one to the right of that looks a little more rufous, and then the one to the right of that has no streaking, no visible streaking,
Yep.
and then the one on the far right looks like a combination of the other three.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, they are very variable. My first experience with the red cap larks, I was completely confounded until I realized also
yeah,
they
but
they
it
they they
it's
don't always look like the picture in the book.
yeah, yeah, it's nice though because they're individuals and they're all different. And
Yeah,
I like that about them.
yeah,
Who is a different one?
yeah. And then this is spike-heeled lark. This is a widespread species in southern
Yeah.
Africa. I don't know how far north it goes, but it's fairly widespread. I mean, I've never had them in my garden, but they do occur not far from here. They're
Mhm.
pretty common out in Suikerbos Run Nature Reserve, which is it's about an hour drive from here, and then they're all over there. But I was kind of a little bit surprised to see them in the desert there, and it's got a slightly different color pattern from the one I'm used to. So also, I had to get out Fancy Peacock's book and
Mhm.
and have a look and see what it was.
Yeah.
But they're also, they've got also their own peculiar behavior. They're down in the grass, they're down among the stones, they're down and they
Yeah.
just don't come out.
Yeah.
You can be in a place where there's 1,000 of them and you never see one.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
so this is the great thing about the LBJs. They
Yeah.
all have subtle differences in their behavior, how they look, what they do. And this is very typical. It'll do this in the grass, in pure grassland as well. It'll pop up on a little stone or If it's a place with elephants, it'll hop up onto a piece of elephant dung, and just look around like that.
Very nice. Very interesting. It stands almost like a pipit as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think unfortunately that we're a little bit short on time.
Yep, I agree.
And man, I'd really like to go through this whole thing because you sent me a lot of really nice
Yeah, I
information.
wasn't so sure how long it would take and how much I would have to say about each one. So I thought better have too many and cut it down
Yeah.
to not enough to get
But
through.
yeah, but also, I mean, we're talking about birds, and it's you and I talking about birds, and we are definitely like never going to stop. I'm
That's
sure.
true. That's true.
Yeah. Yeah. There's one question from Helen on the chat. Helen asked if there's any wind out there. I'm not sure exactly which location you're talking about, Helen.
I know what she's talking about. She's talking about Tanquacaru because
Yeah.
I asked her once. She's a friend of mine. I asked her once, "How's Tanquacaru?" And she said it blew me away. So I thought she meant that it blew her away in the sense of being amazing, but she was actually talking about the wind. So yes,
Oh, nice.
no, the wind in Tanqua is incredible. That you really can't do photography after about 9:30 in the morning up until the sun starts to go down. Even in the late afternoon, if you don't have some protection, your camera will get sandblasted. So yeah, the wind blows very hard there. The Karoo National Park there was wind, but not like in Tanqua. Tanqua was, it was really, really, really windy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, the night that we spent at Paper Saboom, we couldn't put the ropes up on the tent because it was just impossible to do. It just, it was just blowing around too much. So
Wow.
just left it without the ropes and put rocks inside of it.
I personally, I don't like to go birding when it's too windy, because then I can't hear what's going on and I can't hear the birds that are calling or whatever.
Yeah.
But I do like to enjoy a little bit of breeze. I mean, we're from the Caribbean, so it's an inherent aspect of our being, right?
Yeah, but in the morning, early in the morning, it's fine. The great thing is that the wind is not there during the early morning golden hours. So
Yeah.
photography time and no wind time happen to coincide.
Nice. I have another question from Caroline, and she says, Derek, thank you for sharing your fascinating road trip and photos. Unfortunately, I hear a lot about birders getting robbed of their equipment in South Africa. How do you handle safety during your trip?
So that's actually a very good question. I've never heard of it happening on, from somebody driving on the road or anything like that. I think it might happen if you are in in a city or something like that. And there are places that I know about where I wouldn't go, So if for example, I was going to Kalahari, I would quickly go through Kuruman, because Kuruman is known for having smash and grab. So I wouldn't go into Kuruman. I'd stay on the highway and go through. But just outside Kuruman is Red Sands lodge and camping area, and it is absolutely fantastic. So you just have to, it's like being anywhere. You know where to go and where not to go.
Do your research.
Yeah, but in the national parks, I've never heard of that happening in any of the national parks or reserves. There is a nature reserve just outside of Johannesburg called Murrayvale, which I go to all the time. I was there last weekend. I might go there on Sunday. I can't go tomorrow because I've got other stuff to do, but Sunday I probably will go there. It's a good place to go for target practice because there's just so many birds there. If you want to try out something with your camera or whatever, there's going to be birds there. And there was a robbery there about 4 years ago, where someone came into the birding hide and knocked a birder on the head and took his camera. Fortunately, nobody was seriously hurt. And they brought in security And since then, I've gone there and slept overnight there and never had any issues. So I think you just have to know, Um, but in the national parks, I mean, I've been to all but 3 of the national parks now, and I've spent many hours, days there, and gone up through Botswana, up through Namibia, up through Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and I've never had any issues. The people are friendly, helpful. I've never had any issues.
Wonderful. I think if anyone has any other questions, you feel free to say something. I see Miranda is looking at this from the Pacific Northwest in the US, which is a place that I always wanted to visit, that boreal rainforest area.
Yeah, that's amazing. Amazing place.
So on that topic, I have a final question for you, Derek. Is there a bucket list bird that you have?
I have a lot of bucket list birds. I think we have about 900 and something breeding species in South Africa, and I think I've probably seen about 550 of them. So I still got a lot to go.
Yeah.
What is my
bird that you could choose to say, well, I want to materialize this, what is it going to be?
So the three-banded courser would definitely be high on my list. I've got all the other coursers, but not that one. And I went to Mapungubwe in March specifically to look for the three-banded courser. There was a population there. Unfortunately, nope, no luck. Not in, and there were several spots where you could find them, but I didn't find them. But I did find some other larks.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, right, you could be walking right next to a three-banded courser and not see it.
Yeah, because you're going to go at night, but I did go at night, so.
Yeah, nice. I've seen that species in the day, but only because we had a guide that knew where they were and was pointing it out. And even when he was pointing it out, I'm there like, what, where? Because their camouflage is ridiculous.
Yeah, no, they are very camouflaged. There are 2 species, of course. There's that Marek safari as well. I didn't raise that issue, but that was another one of the reasons I went there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, Derek, thank you for joining us in this and being the guinea pig in this very first episode. And a huge thanks to all of you who are looking at this live as well. And of course, thanks to everyone everywhere who appreciates birds, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, definitely, right? So yeah, I hope to see you all in a month for the next episode. And we have a few incredible webinars coming up on Learn the Birds. That is next week. So Derek, I don't know if you would like to just touch on what's coming up, or I can just say, well, we have.
Well, I think next week is going to be really special. If you enjoyed my picture of the blue-footed booby and the penguin in Galapagos, Elizabeth Sickaries is going to be talking about Galapagos next week. So that'll be Thursday at the same time as this one started.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, with that, thanks again, everyone, and have a good one. And remember,
bye, everyone.
bird is the word, right?
Bird is the word, man.